uh, download it from Facebook.
Good point. Very good point, Chris. Okay. Hi, everyone. We are doing a live stream right now on LibraCoin. That's Facebook's new
It's just called Libra. It's not called LibraCoin.
Okay, Libra. Thanks, Chris. Okay, so we've all read the white paper, which was released yesterday, I believe. And yeah, I think we had some mixed opinions about it. So what thoughts did you guys have?
I'm cautiously optimistic. Basically, it doesn't seem to compete with Bitcoin in any significant way. It does seem like it's trying to compete with fiat currencies in a significant way, especially fiat currencies in smaller developing countries. So,
yeah, so Facebook owns WhatsApp, of course, and WhatsApp has about 200 million users in India alone. So that's a key market. These developing nations where people really need or people want remittance services, remittance options that are cheap. So especially when friends and family work in another country, they can send money back home. So that's one thing which long ago, that was kind of one of the dreams of Bitcoin, and it never really lived up to that promise. So maybe Libra can do something like that.
right. So Bitcoin has a second layer in the works called Lightning Network, which should be a lot cheaper and faster than the base layer of Bitcoin. It's true that Bitcoin never caught on with merchants and with, sort of people in poorer countries because of the transaction fees and because of the confirmation times. So it seems like this new cryptocurrency from Facebook is going to try and be a payments network that succeeds at those problems where Bitcoin's base layer failed. But again, Bitcoin is the second layer of Bitcoin, which should address those problems, is under development. So I guess it will kind of compete with that.
Okay. How so? Like, do you mean like the Lightning Network kind of thing?
Yes, exactly. The Lightning Network should enable fast and like basically instant and practically free payments. With Bitcoin's base layer, buying something in a shop was kind of practical because you have to sit there and wait for a confirmation, which takes 10 minutes. So if you try and go in a restaurant or you try to go to a bar and you buy a drink, or if you made like the example that's always given is you go to a coffee shop and buy a coffee, it's like a $3 coffee or whatever, and you're sitting there waiting 10 minutes for this to confirm. It's kind of impractical for that sort of use case. So that's why the Lightning Network is being built, so that you can just send a payment and instantly it goes to the merchant, they receive it, you can walk out of the shop with your coffee.
Cool.
So the reason why I say that Facebook's new Libra doesn't compete with Bitcoin is because, for a few reasons. The first is that Libra doesn't seem to be an investment. It's a stable coin, meaning that it's supposed to hold its value. It's supposed to neither increase or decrease in value over time. And so what that means is that, it doesn't really make sense to buy it and hold it as an investment. It makes sense to buy it and hold it like you would the dollar, so that you can use it. And you can keep it in your Facebook wallet. Facebook is developing this wallet for Libra called Calibra or Calibra or something like that. And so that's going to be the original, reference implementation of the wallet for this Libra cryptocurrency. And, but I thought it was interesting. What I thought that was interesting about the yeah the new cryptocurrency. It's so the cryptocurrency community has been going back and forth and being like, well, it's not really a cryptocurrency, it's not really a blockchain. It yeah, it's kind of impressive though what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it this decentralized. Like they founded this nonprofit organization called the Libra Association, which is supposed to govern it. And Facebook is just going to be one member out of many dozens. And it kind of looks like they're trying to control it, but at the same time they're trying not to control it. And the way that I see it going is the more success that it has, the less control over it they're going to have. Which, of course, I've predicted since the beginning, which is the exact reason why I'm kind of a Bitcoiner, because I'm like, well, Bitcoin is maximally decentralized. So anything that would try to take Bitcoin's place would have to be, either be centralized, right? And in that case, it doesn't really compete with Bitcoin, or it would have to be decentralized, in which case, the entity who's trying to control it is not going to be able to control it. So, so if it's this centralized thing, then it's basically just, competing with fiat currencies, and, maybe it'll compete with the dollar or something like that. And if it's decentralized, then that's good for the world. That's good for the world.
Yeah, I think the question of centralization around Libra is really interesting, because it does seem like if you read the white paper, they're trying to really make the case that that's going to be somewhat decentralized and it's going to be permissioned at first, but they're moving towards permissionless.
Yeah, that's one thing that the Bitcoin community seized on as kind of here we go again, it's very, like, I'm very skeptical of that claim. That, 5 years down the road, they say in the white paper, we're going to start this process 5 years, at most 5 years, of moving from a permissioned system to a permissionless system. And if you just look at historical examples of organizations that have tried to do this, that have tried to start centralized and then end up decentralized, generally they don't end up succeeding. Or they end up, putting off their promises or something like that. And on top of that, we have to look at Facebook's track record. Do we really, Facebook said, oh, we'll never sell your data to advertisers, and lo and behold, they're selling our data to advertisers, and that's their primary method of earning money. So, and Facebook knows this. Facebook knows that the public doesn't trust them. And so they seem to have put a lot of effort into the paper, into convincing people that they're not trying to control this currency. So, we'll see how it goes, but honestly, if it starts to take off, then there will, this sort of rich developer and user ecosystem should develop around the coin. And that's what they say in the white paper. They say, we want this, this open source community where, anybody can build on top of it, anybody can use it. And, if that happens and there's this kind of rich ecosystem, then, they're not gonna really be able to control that. So
here's one counter argument. I want to move into that topic you just brought up, but just before we move on, I've heard people make the argument that basically Libra is going to be more decentralized than Bitcoin in a way. And I know I don't necessarily agree with that, but for as far as the argument goes,
are you cut out? What did you say there? Sorry, that Libra is going to be what?
Well, people make the argument that Libra can be viewed as more decentralized than Bitcoin, because Libra is going to have 100 major nodes, like proof of stake. It's going to, the Libra investment community is going to start off by being 100 nodes, and then they hope to eventually make it permissionless in its permission state. You basically, for Libra to be compromised, a third of those nodes at least need to be compromised. Whereas in Bitcoin, they say there's a dozen or so major nodes around the world of large miners that, if they colluded, could really control the coin. So from a certain perspective, you could make the argument that Libra is going to be more robust than Bitcoin.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
Yeah. So the reason why that's incorrect is because the nodes that control Bitcoin are these mining pools. That's what you're referring to. And mining pools are not really single operators. They're pools of miners. And these miners can point their hash power at whatever pool they want. And so if a pool operator who's running the node decides to do something bad on the network, to, say they decide to start censoring some type of transaction or something like that, then the miners who are pointing their hash power at that mining pool can simply change their hash power and point it at a different pool. Actually, the decentralization of Bitcoin has been tested repeatedly. I mean, there have been, it's kind of theorized that the miners could take over Bitcoin, but there was a civil war that kind of happened back in 2017 where the miners tried to do exactly that. They tried to push some changes that the wider community did not want, and they failed. And actually, that's probably one of the major reasons why we had that bubble at the end of 2017, because it was basically demonstrated that Bitcoin was decentralized.
Was this the SegWit thing?
Yeah, SegWit was part of it. There were people who were trying to make the blocks bigger, and some of those people split off and made Bitcoin Cash in I think it was like August of 2017. And then there was a bunch of large companies and miners that tried to make something called SegWit 2x in November of 2017. And they were basically about to fork off, and they were about to, declare their independence from the Bitcoin network and try to become the real Bitcoin. And at the last moment, they called it off. And then all of the people who were pushing for SegWit 2x then joined Bitcoin Cash. And that's when you saw Bitcoin Cash kind of explode. But basically the developers and the user community basically won the civil war, and that's where we are today.
That's really fascinating.
But on the other hand, Facebook's Libra is not going to be like that. Facebook's Libra is going to be we don't really know exactly how the consensus algorithm is going to work. Apparently there's this they modified this consensus algorithm called hot stuff or something like that, and made their own Byzantine fault tolerant consensus mechanism. But it's supposed to be based on proof of stake or something like that, which is what Ethereum runs on. And but Ethereum hasn't moved all the way to proof of stake because there are lots of problems with proof of stake, namely that one actor can generally there are lots of ways for one bad actor to take control of the system and change it to do whatever they want. So Facebook's system is going to be very centralized. So basically, so you said there's going to be 100 nodes, right, that are validating. I think right now it's like 28 or something like that. And you have to pay $10 million or something like that to be able to run one of these validating nodes. That's actually much less than the amount of full nodes that are being run on Bitcoin. On Bitcoin, anybody can run a full node. Anybody can run a mining node. But in practice, as you noted, there are only a few like large mining nodes. But those large mining nodes don't have as much power as they kind of appear to have. Whereas with Facebook, the validating nodes are actually the full nodes. So on Bitcoin, if you look at the non-mining full nodes, there are thousands of those. There are at least 10,000. I don't remember what the count is. And those people are the people verifying, the blockchain. They've downloaded an entire copy of the blockchain. They're verifying that each transaction is valid. They're verifying the rules aren't being changed in a way that they don't like. On Facebook, again, like you said, there's going to be about 100, and they're all going to be these large corporations, with big data centers. And it should be fairly easy for governments to collude to control that. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, honestly, what it looks like is Facebook is trying to kind of upend the system of financial regulation that exists right now globally. But on the other hand, they could lose that fight. But it's going to be a fight, and it's going to be kind of fun to watch, I think.
It's really interesting. Like, hey, Kurt, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, one thing I'm thinking about is what Chris is talking about, how they plan to change it from permissioned into permissionless. So if you have these 30 or 100 nodes, and they're all working independently, but they're trying to, well, they'd have to censor certain transactions, or they'd have to just put a wholesale block on a lot of transactions because it's going to be illegal to make them. So that's how it makes it really difficult to transition into a permissionless system, because you have to comply with the law, and then all of a sudden they wouldn't have to comply with the law, and the law isn't going to like that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. That's a really interesting point. That almost does seem like it makes it completely infeasible for it to become permissionless.
Yes, unless Libra actually breaks down all of the international legal restrictions, which that's probably a bit too much for them, but they'll probably have some effect on regulations for sure.
What kind of regulation? Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so the whole reason why Bitcoin is popular is because it doesn't require KYC AML. And this is another reason why, people sort of unbanked people can use Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. It's one of the reasons why people are excited about cryptocurrencies, because a lot of people who are unbanked in these poorer countries and even in the richer countries, they don't have like a government identity. There really is no way for them to go through that sort of KYC AML, know your customer / anti-money laundering is what that stands for, process.
What is KYC? And I don't know what that is.
Yeah, so KYC stands for know your customer, and AML stands for anti-money laundering.
So KYC is kind of like a nice way of saying anti-money laundering. It's like it's the practical side of it. Like you have to have the IDs of the customers and that sort of thing. Know which jurisdiction they're in. Right, exactly. So like you'll see a lot of sort of invasive, like when you sign up on Coinbase, when you sign up on a Bitcoin exchange, those, an exchange that converts between cryptocurrency and fiat, they'll ask for your government ID. They'll ask for a picture of you holding your government ID. They'll ask for your birth date, and they'll ask you all this information, your address, and that's because they're legally required to do that, because they're a money transmitter. Basically, financial regulations are such that, they're in the U.S. There's this regulatory body called FinCEN, Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, I believe is what it stands for, and basically you can go to jail if you are a money transmitter and you don't know your customer and you don't, have this information. Whenever anybody sends money on your network, if you don't have this information about their identity, then you can go to jail because, of course, there's no way for the government to find that person and put them in jail or, in some way. So, this is the whole reason why Bitcoin is exciting, because it bypasses that process.
So it's basically like at a bar, the bartender can be liable if you're underage or something, or you drink and drive and die. Yeah, that's actually a really good analogy. There's a lot of stuff like that where, since the government, doesn't know the person who actually did the crime, then they can go after the person who enabled them to do the crime. And you see this even with, there have been just kind of local traders on local Bitcoins who, habitually trade Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And, there have been traders who have gotten in trouble because some FBI agent will come to them and be like, hey, I want to buy some Bitcoin, I'm going to use it to buy drugs. And if the person then goes ahead and sells them the Bitcoin, then the FBI will just arrest them. It's sting operations and that sort of thing. Or if they try to transact a large amount and then they say, aha, you didn't file the appropriate notice to the Financial Intelligence Authority. Right. Yeah. In the U.S., you're required to file a report with I guess it's FinCEN, if there's a transaction on your network that's $10,000 or more, I think. Right. Yeah. Likewise in Australia with Austrac. But even with small transactions, which we presume this Libra coin is going to be used for, if somebody can send lots of little transactions and it adds up to a lot of money, then the money transmitter can get in trouble for that too. If the proper, personally identifying information is not captured for those transactions.
Yeah, like suspicious matter reports, that kind of thing. If there's a weird pattern of transfers, then they're supposed to report it to FinCEN, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a comment pointing out that to be a node in Libra, you either have to meet the $10 million requirement, or you can be a nonprofit that meets certain requirements for reputation and size. So,
oh, interesting.
It's a good comment. It's important to get that distinction.
I did not hear about that second option. That's interesting. But again, it's this consortium, this cartel basically, who gets to decide who can run a node. It's not like Bitcoin where you just download the software and run it, and now you're a node.
Right. Exactly. So, why do you guys think Facebook is doing this?
I think they're still looking at ways to make money. So I think it's still quite difficult for Facebook to make money. They probably do all right with ads, but I think for a long time Facebook really wasn't making money until they started pushing down on ads. And you see them like every year or so, they try a new thing with ads. They'll try to ask you to promote a personal post or something like that. So I suspect this is it's just a new way to make money. I think that's a primary motivation. And I think that they do that. Well, what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, well, so it's that, but I think there's a kind of more specific way in which they're trying to make money, which is that they've been pushing they've been pushing into developing markets. They've been pushing into emerging markets like poorer countries. And they're doing this because there are, billions of users without, who don't have access to the internet. They've been sponsoring, I don't remember what the project was called, but like actually building internet access in poorer countries so that more people would have access to the internet. I mean, basically Facebook has like 2.5 billion users, right? And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to expand their user base. They're trying to have more users. And so the only way that they can really do this is by expanding the reach of the internet, basically. I mean, they've kind of hit the edges of the internet, and now they have to push it out so that they can get more users. So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get more users. And they're trying to make Facebook more useful and more addictive to all of these people who basically don't have access to the internet and don't have access to social media, and now they're trying to expand money to those people as well. So I mean,
that number though, for the number of people on Facebook is just crazy. Like there's more Facebook users than Muslims or Christians.
Yeah, it's nuts. I mean, Facebook is almost kind of like a world government, at least for their section of the internet.
But this is a thing. We're going to find out probably if this thing catches on. We're going to find out how many of those users are actually real people, because it could be like maybe only 400 million people worldwide using Facebook. We wouldn't know.
Right. Yeah. So the interesting thing again is that at first you're gonna be required to have a government ID in order to use this coin on Facebook. The interesting thing about Libra is that it appears to be designed with a public-private key model like Bitcoin, where you just create a public key, or you just create a private key, and then you use some math, and that creates your address, and then you can go ahead and start sending money using that. And they also mentioned that the addresses are pseudonymous, which means like as far as the protocol is concerned, you don't have to have an identity. And so it sounds like they're going to enforce this identity thing at a higher level, at the wallet level. So it seems like there are potential wallets that could access this Libra cryptocurrency and use it without an identity. So it'll be really interesting to see how they restrict people from using that if the protocol basically doesn't care whether you have an identity.
Ariel, do you have some different ideas on why Facebook might be implementing this?
All that makes sense. I mean, there's like a cynical part of me that's, thinking data mining people's purchase history and stuff like that for advertising. But I mean, in the white paper, they do talk about trying to separate the social component from the technical crypto component. So it's kind of, to some extent, that almost seems like it depends on to what extent you take Facebook in good faith and to what extent you're cynical about Facebook. I'm a little bit cynical about Facebook, but I don't know. Like, I'd need to know more about how it's actually being implemented and whether that would be a possible thing Facebook could do.
Of course, that's what they're going to do. Yeah, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head there. They're trying to, to expand their user base and make more people use it. And then once they have more people, then they're going to mine all those people's data so that they can sell them more stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it also it makes me probably at a less cynical level, it's probably really good for Facebook to be at the center of a whole, because they're trying to create a blockchain ecosystem around Libra, right? Like, they have the new language and there's going to be all kinds of applications built on top of it. So it's like they're creating a whole new Facebook world out of that, which I'm sure would be good for them too.
Yeah. So even if they don't end up sort of centrally controlling this cryptocurrency, they started it. And so they're going to be holding a lot of the tokens once it launches. And so even if they can't control what it does after a certain point, basically there's probably going to be like a pre-mine, like Facebook is going to own a whole bunch of those coins. And so I don't know if that really matters though, because it's a stable coin. So maybe they'll make like another asset, kind of like Steam, where like one fluctuates in value and goes up and down with the market and the other, stays stable with the dollar or something like that. I don't know how that's going to work.
I think they're doing that. I think there's a Libra investment token. Let me just fact check that.
Okay, because if they have an investment token, then and they're holding a lot of those tokens, then basically their investment in those tokens should go up over time as the popularity increases and more people start using it.
Yeah, there's a Libra investment token.
Huh.
So, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't read about that in the white paper, so maybe I guess I missed it.
So they're also talking about not using specifically US dollar, but using a basket of currencies, which is kind of weird from a customer experience perspective, because it's like everybody kind of knows how much a dollar is worth, or maybe a pound or euro. But if they're using a basket of different currencies, it's like you won't know how much it is exactly. It's a very abstract thing. Well, quite abstract.
Yeah. So what Kurt is referring to is, so Libra is going to be a little bit like Tether, where supposedly there's going to be an equal amount of fiat currency, an equal value of fiat currency for all of the Libra in circulation. And as Kurt said, this is basically going to be like bank deposits in various currencies, not just the dollar. And what I assume will happen is there will be some kind of, it'll go on coinmarketcap.com or something like that, and you'll be able to look up the price of a Libra. And, it's supposed to be, they said it'll fluctuate a little bit, but at like as the value of the underlying fiat currencies fluctuates, but it should actually be more stable than like any of the component currencies. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I was sort of hoping in the white paper for them to lay down some kind of clear algorithm for how the stable coin would be priced based on these different currencies. I don't know if they're just going to try out a few different algorithms and come out with one eventually, but I think that would probably be a good thing to have eventually, to be just really clear about how this price of the stable coin is going to relate to the price of this basket of currencies.
Well, so they tried to explain it, and basically it's, they basically say, a Libra coin can only be created when somebody trades fiat to buy the equivalent amount of Libra. And Libra can be destroyed if somebody sells their Libra back into fiat. And so presumably, they'll try to support as many fiat currencies as they can. And actually, this is where I think it's going to get interesting, where basically Facebook is going to be competing with a lot of these like tiny fiat currencies, and may even push a lot of them out of business. So we'll definitely see some regulatory actions by angry small countries.
Yeah, so I did see a headline saying that India is now enforcing harsh penalties about any cryptocurrency. So maybe that's partly the reason they're doing this.
Really interesting. Okay, here, let's on one side, what do you guys see as the potential pros of Libra?
I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, basically, this is going to show a lot of people the value of cryptocurrency. It's going to push a lot of people into using cryptocurrency. I just read an article on, I think it was like CNBC, that said, AOL got you online, and Libra is going to get you into cryptocurrency. It's basically crypto for the masses, which is what all of the altcoins after Bitcoin are trying to do. But this one might actually succeed because Facebook is such a big company with so much funding, and they're partnering with all these other big companies. I believe there's Visa, there's MasterCard, there's Uber, there's Lyft on there. There's just like all of these, companies that have all of this funding, and they'll be able to fight the legal battles that the other cryptocurrencies couldn't. So that's one pro. Another one is, if it works as described, it will actually succeed in banking a lot of people who don't have access to the financial system right now. And so that'll make, that should, if it works, again, if it works as described, it should cause like an economic boom. If you look at Kenya has a system called M-Pesa, which was actually originally cell phone minutes. There's a company called Safaricom, which is owned by Vodacom, and they allowed you to pay other people in cell phone minutes. And before too long, this actually just became the money, the way that the official payment system of Kenya. And Kenya had this giant economic boom because now all these people are able to use money. And so you might see something similar happen sort of globally if Libra takes off. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So like here in Argentina, you see the inflation against the US dollar. It's like, it's not that bad. It's relatively stable, but it must be like 10 or 15% a year or more. It's pretty bad. So, but also, yeah, remittances, if they're saying that you can send money for free. So if it starts to get acceptance, so I imagine them making like a little app, and you could go into a store and it'll probably be pretty cheap to accept payments using it. So imagine you have a little stall in India selling coconut water, and somebody comes up and says, "Oh, Facebook Pay, swipe your mobile phone or whatever, near field communication, whatever it is, and then you pay and it costs nothing." So, or likewise, people sending money home to India and it costs them nothing, rather than the 10 or 20% they're paying with the Western Union. What do you think, Ariel?
I think you guys covered it pretty well. It could free up a lot of capital that is unable to flow now because of, like the Libra paper talks about, there's bank fees represent a pretty substantial portion of your transaction costs when you're operating at a low level, like when you have smaller amounts of capital. And this could really help people get around that. Like I like how they describe it as it's like commerce is kind of, for a lot of people, like at the level that like telecom was at in the 90s or whatever, like where if you want to send a text message, it's like 16 cents a text message, so you have to ration them. It's almost like your transactions for a lot of people, it's the same thing. Like maybe not if you're like a millionaire or even like a thousandaire, but if you're operating in the tens or hundreds of dollars and you're a smaller player, then it's hard to make a lot of transactions. And so this could really free up commerce in a big way and create almost like a new paradigm of you know, a new economic paradigm, especially for the third world. So that's pretty exciting.
Well, yeah, and in addition, it will also operate across borders, and so it should create this kind of global economy where it's really easy to actually pay. If you're in India and you want to pay somebody in China, or you want to pay somebody in, Korea or Mexico, or wherever you want, you can send money wherever you want. Because up until this point, countries kind of have their little silos where each country has its own currency. It doesn't really make sense for you to do commerce, to trade with people from other countries, at least directly, just because the payments are really difficult. So I mean, if Facebook succeeds, and I'm skeptical that it will, but if it does, you could see kind of an explosion of economic prosperity, since all of these people are being connected across borders who weren't able to connect before. But we should keep in mind that this is pretty much exactly what PayPal tried to do. And they didn't succeed because, again, governments don't like it when people try to free up money like this. And so if Facebook succeeds, it will be because of the differences between what they're doing and what PayPal did. And the differences are basically just that they have more money and that they're creating a cryptocurrency instead of, a centralized database. So, maybe the fact that it's a cryptocurrency will allow them to say, oh, well, we can't really control this. Like if some government comes after them and says, hey, you have to make sure that people do this, then they can kind of be like, well, we can't really stop it. It's a cryptocurrency. So
that's really fascinating. So they could almost like hide behind the, decentralized aspects and the pseudo-anonymity. Like another thing also that comes to mind as to why why governments might be hesitant to come down on them super hard is it could be almost like if you crack down on Libra, you're driving the world into the arms of Bitcoin, which may be governments, or not Bitcoin, but other cryptocurrencies, that are competing more on a competitive level with Libra, which is probably less desirable for governments.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, it could be governments might see it that way. Like, oh, maybe we should kind of allow this thing to play itself out because, if we let it succeed and we have just enough control over it, then we'll prevent people exactly from moving to sort of more anonymous coins that we don't have control over. So
yeah, so I remember one article. Sorry.
I think that's kind of how Facebook was handling it. They're kind of like, they're trying to really work with regulators. They put that in the white paper. They're like, we really, really want to have regulatory innovation. That's what they say.
Yeah. Yeah, so that sounds watered down and it's not quite as fun and revolutionary as Bitcoin, is it? But I guess we'll take the steps forwad where we can. So I was going to say, there was one article that compared it to Venezuela's Petro. So the Petro was getting a lot of hype from the government. They're all saying, "Oh, we're going to release this cryptocurrency," and they really didn't end up releasing it. I don't know exactly why, but it fizzled out. But even so, people caught on to the idea, like the idea of cryptocurrency got into the popular consciousness of the country, and now a lot of people are using Bitcoin and Dash to preserve their wealth in Venezuela.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so the Petro is considered by the crypto community to be a big scam. I mean, it fits pretty much every definition of a big scam. I mean, it was basically an ICO like exit scam. Apparently, the white paper for the Petro was copy pasted from some other white papers that had already happened. I mean, basically, it was the Venezuelan government being
that's what you call government efficiency.
I guess when you have a dictator, you can get shit done. But yeah, I mean, I think it will be like that. I think it will partially, precipitate some regulatory innovation. It will encourage governments to kind of treat it with a light touch because, I mean, there are like almost 200 countries or more than 200 countries, depending on how you count it. And unless, all of the countries get together and say, we're going to ban this, then some countries are going to allow it. and those countries are going to prosper, like as you're seeing with cryptocurrency, already. And then what was the other thing? Yeah.
So
I had another thing and I forgot.
Okay, fair enough. If they're pushing with the changes in innovation, I wonder also what's going to happen with competitors. So like with Uber, they kind of work their way in around the law and they set this precedent. And then later you have like Cabify and Taxify, and the established taxi industry starts creating apps to try to keep up as well. So I wonder what knock-on effects it will have throughout the fintech industry or the financial industry.
Yeah, so I like to look at the cryptocurrency revolution as kind of the same as what happened with as doing the same thing to the financial industry that BitTorrent did to the media industry. So, before BitTorrent, there was, everything was centralized and CDs were $20 and, you had to listen to radio with ads, or you had to, buy these albums a lot of times when you only knew like one or two songs from the album. And basically things were, the quality was low and the price was high. And then Napster came along, and Napster, I liken it to like eGold and Liberty Reserve. It's kind of like this kind of shady alternative where you can share files, right? Or you can share money. But then because it's centralized, the government can come in and cut off its head, right? And so then BitTorrent came along, and BitTorrent was perfectly decentralized, and so there was no way to shut it down. And so what the centralized players had to do is they had to innovate, and they had to figure out ways that they could compete with the decentralized way of doing things. And eventually out came iTunes and Spotify and all of these sort of music and Netflix sort of media offerings that had a high quality and a low price. And so I think you're going to see something similar happen to the financial. I think basically Libra is the next step in the evolution of that process in the financial
Libra is like iTunes.
Right, exactly. Libra is like the iTunes of the financial.
That's a really
version of
interesting
that.
analogy. Here, we've talked about some of the pros. What are some ways that you can see this project either failing or maybe having detrimental effects in the world?
Kurt, you want to go first this time?
Okay. Yeah, it's a bit difficult. I guess one thing is Facebook is trying to control everything. So maybe they move towards world domination. So I did say in the video that I made on this subject, I compared it to Tether, and Tether, through having that one stable coin at the time when they came out, it was basically the only viable stable coin. And because of that, they gained quite a large market share, and they kind of act like a central bank within cryptocurrency. So it seems like, well, once upon a time on their site, it said that every Tether was one-to-one backed with US dollars. It doesn't say that anymore. What it says is now something a lot vaguer. So now Tether has this power. We don't really know exactly what it's backed by, and they can increase and decrease the supply, and perhaps that influences the prices of other assets. So it means they might have quite a lot of power. We don't know exactly how much power they have. And so the question would be, is the similar thing going to happen with the Libra? So are they going to be able to manipulate entire markets? And if this is as widespread as their highest ambitions, how many markets and how deep in those markets are they going to be able to manipulate?
Yeah, so I agree that this will give Facebook a lot of power, and as noted before, maybe Facebook is not the best organization to be giving a lot of power to, since as we've seen, they pretty much they pretty much betray us every time we trust them. On the other hand, the worst that could happen is that Facebook becomes this central bank. As you said, Kurt, like Tether, but way bigger. And, there are problems with that. Facebook would start manipulating things. They could easily start just printing these, or this consortium, that Facebook is a member of, could easily start just kind of printing much more Libra than they have in their bank accounts. And if their bank accounts are not audited, or if there's shady things going on, they could end up basically being able to print free money for themselves and spend it on whatever they want. So on the other hand, that's already what the the Federal Reserve does. So will it be worse than that? I can't really see it being worse than the Federal Reserve.
Like competition between two monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like the data mining all our transactions is pretty scary. So we have a comment. Lalita said there are a lot of shopping stores on Facebook, and that's the main point. They're trying to create those currencies. They're trying to create the Facebook world within Facebook, in my humble opinion. So that kind of leads well into my next question. What do you guys, if we look at this like the long view, like the world historical zoomed back perspective, where do you guys see this affecting things over the long term? Like, what kind of world do you guys see this creating? Like, or what are the possibilities? Like utopian, dystopian, heterotopian? Where do you guys see this going?
Well, I think that, I think basically the Libra could end up displacing the US dollar as sort of the reserve currency of the world. And I think that's what Facebook is basically angling as this commenter says. They're trying to make this this Facebook economy where there's stores and marketplaces and trades going on, and you're able to send money through Messenger and send money through WhatsApp and send money through Instagram and stuff. And all of that is quite clunky right now. Having to connect your credit card to Facebook and Instagram. I don't even know if you can connect your credit card to Instagram. Actually, I think you just have to. If you do business through Instagram, I think you basically have to just take it offline. I'm not sure about that though. But yeah, this will streamline all of the commerce that could potentially. There's a lot of commerce basically not happening on the internet right now, just because of how clunky the legacy financial system is, and so. So it will definitely unleash a lot of commerce. There will definitely be a lot of just people buying stuff and people selling stuff, and there will be a lot more of that than there is now because it'll be easier. But will it be utopian or dystopian? I think it'll be different. I think it'll be it's kind of like whenever there's a new technological advancement. This strikes me as kind of like a new technological advancement. It's like, like the rise of Uber, right? There were a lot of pros and there were a lot of cons. The pros are that using, getting rides anywhere in cities that have Uber is really easy now and really cheap. And of course, the cons are, that they're kind of bullies, right? And they're using their power to exploit workers, and they're I don't know. Actually, I don't see a lot of downsides of Uber, but a lot of other people would disagree with me on that.
Yeah, people complain about the working conditions. I think there's something to that. Like for a while, you made good money on Uber, but not so much anymore. So it seems like they have people in a tough position.
Yeah, and it's scary that they'll have all your data, right? Uber is mining all of your transportation data, so they know where you're at all the time, and that's scary. But again, banks already have that data on you because you have to, if you use the financial system, you have to have a government identity basically as it stands, unless you use cryptocurrency.
But Uber has stuff like, this is really weird. I don't know if you guys ever saw this. A couple of years ago, Uber released an article talking about some data analysis that they had, and they were talking about the average number of booty calls in a city. So they measured, say, if somebody takes an Uber after 9 p.m. and returns to their home before 2 a.m., something like that, it's a booty call. So, so they had all this data on people's personal lives. It's a little bit alarming.
Wait, what? If they go out after 9 and come back before 2, it's a booty call?
Yeah, and after 9 p.m. and return before 2 a.m.
Or they might just be going out drinking, or they might be going out dancing.
Maybe it was slightly more specific than that, but I mean, that's what they were trying to pin down. They probably said, "Well, it's going to a residential address," but you're right. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to interpret that, but that's what the purpose of the article was doing, and obviously, it breached a little professional ethics there.
That's really interesting. Like, I guess this is kind of where I can see things getting a little bit dystopian, because I can imagine like a future where, especially if these companies are able to cross-reference, like if Uber is able to access that financial data and the transportation data and maybe like your social media data as well, and they have access to all of that, and they're using like cutting edge machine learning and AI and all this stuff. Like, I could see it almost being like a future like Looper. Like, I don't know if you guys see the movie Looper, but in that movie, basically, it's like impossible to commit a crime in the future because there's just no privacy and people are so surveilled, and like the technology can so accurately predict people's actions that crime is just impossible. So if criminals want to have someone killed, they have to send them to the past to get the hit done. And I could almost see a future like that happening where we're not only being surveilled and all these metrics all the time, but because of AI and statistics and the inherent predictability of human behavior and to some group behavior to some extent, like we're just in the web and there's no action that can take place outside of the knowledge or predictability of these giant companies.
So I find it kind of interesting that you consider a world where crime is impossible to be a dystopia.
It depends.
Oh, yes.
It depends what's considered crime, right?
I guess.
No, it doesn't consider what's considered crime. It doesn't depend what's considered crime. It's like it's like in the film The Clockwork Orange. It's like this. It's about this guy Alex, who's this teenage punk, and he's this awful person. Like, he's this rapist, and he's just totally just this destructive force. And in the book, he gets captured by the government and basically gets reprogrammed, so he's unable to commit crime, and he becomes like unable to enjoy music as well. And it's kind of a metaphor, as it's like in a society you have to be able to have things be loose enough that crime is possible in order to have any of the beautiful things that we enjoy.
Wait, are you saying that if a rapist loses the ability to enjoy music, then that's a net loss for society?
No, it didn't articulate that well. In The Clockwork Orange, they basically have like the government kidnaps Al and they like hold his eyes open and like brainwash him, like basically like mind wash him so that he is unable to commit crime. Like he starts like having a seizure or something if he ever tries to commit a crime. But he also is unable to listen to the music that he used to love. He used to love Mozart or something. And it's a metaphor, because it's like if you are able to successfully enough eradicate the criminal element in a society, or the chaos and destructiveness that produces crime, then you're also destroying the creative spark in a society. Because the idea is there's like a certain looseness you need to have for there to be innovation, and that looseness will inevitably produce some degree of crime.
That's interesting. Well, there was one thing I compare it to, the Sesame credit in China. So it's a way of tracking people and check if they're jaywalking or something like that. So it's kind of funny. Apparently, in the Western media, it's always portrayed as like this is how they're going to control Chinese citizens. Like if you if you don't like the government's posts on Facebook, on what's it called? Weibo or so, whatever it is they use there, then you're going to get downvoted. You're going to lose Sesame credits. But if apparently if you ask Chinese people about it, they're like, oh, this is good. It just means you pay your bills on time or something like that. And they see no problem with it, whatever. But that's the kind of control. Like if you're associating with somebody who has a low Sesame credit score, then you're going to get a low Sesame credit score as well. You have to cut off your friends and family if they're not towing the party line, and this kind of thing. So that's how they plan to remove that element of chaos and that creativity, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the crypto community is struggling with this question. I mean, and a lot of people have been struggling with this question for a while, which is, how should you do reputation? How should we, like, if we had the ability to surveil everybody all the time, like, should we do that? And I think, in my opinion, it's the more centralized the system is, the more harmful it can be. And that's because you really don't want one person being able to decide, which things are crimes and, which things are not, because clearly they're going to design that system that's, in a way that favors themselves. But I think that you could have a robust system of reputation that is decentralized. And, it kind of like the Sesame credit thing, except that the Communist Party of China isn't in control of it. It's just people are in control of it. I mean,
Yelp for people.
Sure. Yeah. Yelp for people, except where Yelp, the company isn't a centralized organization. It's some, decentralized system of contracts. So I think you do want something like that, actually, as long as it's a fair system.
It's interesting because it gets into the idea of anonymity a bit, because it's almost like both strength and pitfall of our society is there's a high degree of anonymity. So like in older societies, like it was, when it was more tribal, it was like, if you did something terrible, everyone in the tribe would know and your reputation would plummet. And that would just be like, you don't do that because like a reputation is really, really strong. But like these days, if I live in Toronto and I do something really terrible and I'm humiliated in front of my whole community, I can just move to New York City and start fresh. And in a way, it's like, that's both a strength and a weakness, because it affords me the ability to reinvent myself, but it also can allow me to hide from accountability.
Yeah. And I think that this Facebook coin is going to be similar to that, because there will always be Bitcoin, right? There will always be Monero. There will always be something more, anonymous that you can use. So if you get kicked off the Facebook platform, that'll be, like social ostracization. But yeah, you can always reinvent yourself by going underground and being honest, basically, and just rebuilding scratch.
Yeah, but that's the point about Facebook jail. Like, they always try to get you with Messenger. They're saying, "Oh, connect your SMS to Facebook," and then you connect it, and you have all your social group on Facebook, and then you put the F word in the wrong place on the post, and suddenly you get banned from Facebook for a month, and you can't talk to any of your friends because they're all on Facebook. And so that's the kind of potentially the level of control that would be giving Facebook over our finances.
Right, which is why we need to be vigilant about these things, and we need to use decentralized alternatives as well as the centralized alternative. I mean, you want to have a backup plan in case Facebook decides to come after you for whatever reason they decide to come after you for.
Here's a question. I think Kurt's comment kind of leads into this. If we look really on the long term, like way into the future, to what extent do you guys think this concept of Facebook world could become a reality?
Can you elaborate a bit on what you mean by Facebook world?
Like, to what extent do you guys think that our lives, like Facebook could create just like almost like I used to have this like idea that someday like these giant companies like Facebook or Google, like it could be possible for them to almost create these like entire like just all consuming ecosystems where your finances take place within Facebook, your social world takes place within Facebook, your maybe you live at a Facebook compound and there's other Facebook people there, and there's Facebook healthcare, Facebook education. Like, to what extent could Facebook become something like a government or a society on its own? Like, to what extent do you guys think something like that might be possible?
I think that, as I was saying before, the more Facebook moves towards that, the more people are going to be suspicious of Facebook, and they're going to want to use alternatives just on principle. I think people are doing that now. I mean, you see people who are kind of like privacy activists who are just like, I don't use Facebook. And, Facebook hasn't really become dystopian yet, but if they do, I guarantee you'll see, waves of people outflowing from the Facebook ecosystem into other ecosystems. I mean, I do think that I do think that I believe in the invisible hand of the market, basically. As if a product is providing a useful service at a good cost, then people will use the service. If it starts to become oppressive, if it starts to suffer from shitty quality and rises in price, then people will move to some other solution. I mean, especially with the internet as connected as it is, it's very easy to kind of spin up free alternatives to these giant tech behemoths, Google, Facebook, Amazon, all that.
But it is kind of a fine line, because it's like Facebook can keep pushing it, and the people who do suffer the most on Facebook don't really have a voice because they're not on Facebook, or they don't have a voice on Facebook anyway. I guess we're kind of living in Google world at the moment. So we have search engine, people have their phones and their email accounts with Google. I'd say Google probably has more control of Facebook, but you could probably make a case either way. So yeah, I guess I agree with Chris. Like, they have to keep themselves in line if they're going to be controlling everything. So we'll still have alternatives that might be more difficult to use or something like that, but there's always other things out there.
Well, and this push that they're doing right now, as I was referring to earlier, into emerging markets, where basically Facebook is like somebody who is just accessing the internet now in an emerging country, their entire experience of the internet is going to be Facebook. And so, there's a danger that the more Facebook expands and becomes the internet to a large portion of the global population, those people are not going to know that there are alternatives to Facebook, because they, basically, their experience of the internet is Facebook. And so they're not going to see the Facebook alternatives on Facebook, because Facebook is probably going to block information about the alternatives. So I definitely think that there's a danger that a very large percentage of the world population might end up getting locked into the Facebook ecosystem. And basically it's up to us. I mean, it's up to people who have, an experience of the decentralized internet to create alternatives and to find people who are sort of trapped inside Facebook and liberate them.
Oh my God, it sounds like the hero's journey, like in reverse almost.
Yeah,
travel,
or like
from the
Matrix
unknown into the known.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I think we're coming up on closing this off. Do you guys have any other comments or things you wanted to briefly discuss before we end this off?
Yeah, there is one thing. I think this is kind of a step in the path. So it's like Bitcoin is one step, and it's a little bit very, very radical and very outside what's accepted as normal. And then we take another step, and it's closer to what's normal, but it's still very far outside what we would have considered normal, 15 years ago. And so I don't think Facebook is or Libra is the ultimate step or the ultimate path. What's going to happen is there's going to be something else that branches off of it, and maybe it's a Lightning Network, or maybe it's a different cryptocurrency or something else we haven't anticipated, and it's probably going to be even better. So Libra will come with its pros and cons, and then we'll keep moving.
Right. As a lot of like gold bugs and crypto bugs like to point out, world reserve currency status doesn't usually last for longer than about, I think it's like 80 years, something like that. So the dollar's moment is coming up. So, if Libra takes its place or something else takes its place, we'll only have to wait about 80 years and then something else will happen. I guess 80 years it's a long time. I'd like to have a nice next 80 years.
Yeah, things are changing more rapidly these days, I think.
Cool.
I think it's lower than that. I think it's 40 years. I might have gotten that wrong.
40 average for a fiat currency, but maybe a reserve currency is similar.
It's 27 average for a fiat currency.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, but the British pound being the outlier that's existed for centuries.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys. This was an awesome discussion. Thank you, audience, for coming on this journey with us. It's been a lot of fun. And yeah, we will let it be up to history to see how things go. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.